Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to a very special bonus episode. And this week we have with us Tim Bourguignon. Hey Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey Vasco, long time no see.
Indeed. Tim has been a guest on the podcast before. You can find the link to his episodes in the show notes. And he's even hosted some episodes for the podcast in French. So if you speak French, go ahead and check those episodes out. Tim is also a software leader and mentor who enjoys pushing people to reflect on their journey, as he does himself, even publicly on his podcast as well as here. And he leads the product engineering for a French prop tech startup called We Maintain, and has hosted the Software Developers Journey podcast since 2016, which is about the same time I've hosted the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast.
We're that old.
We're like podcast twins, right? Exactly. Born at the same time.
Yeah, we have almost the same haircut as well.
Indeed. So, Tim, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how does a software developer end up in leadership and management positions at software companies? What's your journey?
That's a great question, and thanks for inviting me to talk about this. So, I have been a software developer at heart for forever, and one thing I didn't realize for a very long time was that I was fighting against something. And so it started with my first job after 6 months working in algorithm optimization for a big German company. I realized I was doing something else. I was teaching a lot. I was handholding a lot. I was helping people a lot. And I didn't like that. So I quit. I changed job. I started doing something else. And after 6 months, I realized I was, again, helping people a lot. And didn't like that either. And so I quit. And on for, I would say, a bit less than 10 years. But
so it kind of became a pattern for you.
Oh, absolutely.
So you started as an engineer and ended up doing something else.
Yeah. And so at some point I became a consultant, so software consultant. And then
you really need to help people.
Exactly. I started doing this for real, for money, not just as an accident, I would say, but really for money. And that's pretty much the moment where one of my mentors really helped me realize that there was a pattern here, and realized that it was not an accident, but because I was maybe good at doing some part of this. And so he took a lot of introspection and reflection. But at some point, it was something like 2014, I started embracing this and saying, okay, if this is what I seem to be good at, let's stop fighting against it and let's try to embrace it and see what happens. And so that's basically the moment where I started changing from a software consultant to a more architectural consultant, and then technical agile coach, I would put. So more in the how we work together and how we create complex products, more than how we create the product itself in code. And this has been my journey until 2021. So deep into the COVID pandemic, where I said, "Hey, now I need to see something else." And
why did you say to yourself, "I need to see something else"? What was going on?
It has a lot to do with the company I was working for, which I won't go into details there. But I started basically seeing the same patterns with my clients, meaning I was helping a lot. I was unclogging a lot of processes. I was helping developers, helping the strategy, helping the strategic level of the companies, but there seemed to be always something missing. And now that I've seen something else, I think I can put words on it, what I couldn't really do back then.
But how did it feel like that back then? Let's help our listeners understand where you were at that time. You didn't yet know what was missing, but you had this sense that, okay, something is off here. How did it feel? What were the things that you were seeing, the patterns, the behaviors that you were experiencing at that time before you could name it?
fighting against the grain, always fighting, basically. Nothing was working the way I thought it should be. It was always an uphill battle. The choice of words I'm using is not an accident. It felt like always fighting battle, always not being at the right place, not doing or not behaving the way it should be, and this at some point became troublesome. I didn't know what right was, but I knew that where I was didn't feel like what I expected it should be. Agility brought a promise of, hey, it's going to be better, it's going to be sustainable, it's going to be something that we look for. And in the companies or the client, with the customers I work with, it never felt this way.
So it felt like Agile was a problem?
In some way, yes. It felt like Agile was disrupting a system that in some ways were working, and not bringing the system to a stable state. And so we're constantly in this
basically creating more problems than solving them.
Absolutely. Which was basically the idea of agility. We're going to create problems and we're going to surface them, and then we're going to make them transparent, and then we're going to solve them, and we're going to come to a stable state again, and everything's going to be a bit better. And if we do that quickly enough, often enough, iterate on it, it's going to be better over time. And what I saw was it's creating deep and troubling problems inside the organizations, because there seems to be a divide somewhere. And it took me a long time to realize where that is.
So when you started being able to name it, what came up? Like, so we've heard about this, maybe feeling like Sisyphus, right? Pushing a rock uphill, kind of getting into the same problems over and over again, hoping to solve, but actually finding more problems and more problems and more problems instead. So that was how you felt at that time. But at some point you started to realize what wasn't working. So what was that?
I started realizing this when I saw the same pattern emerging in many of my clients again. I was hired to, I'm making air quotes, solve the problems with the development teams. And basically after a few days, I turned around and started working with the leadership. And that was always the same pattern. The teams were not the problem, the leadership was. And when I realized that this was a pattern, it was not just an accident with some of my clients, but a pattern with every one of them, that the leadership was blocking something. The leadership was not enabling something. The leadership was had a key role to play and was not playing it. This is what started to become the, there's something happening here. That makes sense?
Yeah. And of course, as we were prepping this episode, you talked about that story that ultimately led you to where you are. So talk to us. You're most recently started at We Maintain as an engineering lead. So tell us about that journey, because at that time, it wasn't anymore you working with leadership, you became leadership. So
exactly.
You went from naming the problem to being the problem. Of course, not like that, but you were in that position, right?
Absolutely.
So walk us through that journey. How did you then handle it when you were the one that had that ability to help teams and unblock teams?
I won't have all the answers, and obviously everything is very subjective. It's our journey in this very special setup. Just to roll back for a minute, the way I was hired was very startup-y. Started connecting with Tristan, who is now my boss and the CTO and co-founder of the company, and we realized we gelled a lot. We really connected on all levels. From the human side all the way to the technical side, with all the leadership and empowerment and freedom in between. We talked for a bit. I was hired over some beers at some point, really going through the very lightweight interviews of talking to people, and you don't realize it's an interview, but actually it is. And one of the things I did during all those discussions was really put my consulting hat on and start searching for problems and seeing, well, what is not working in this company? Where can I add value? What can I change? At that time, we didn't decide if I could be in the leadership position or more in the coaching position. We asked ourselves what would make sense. And I remember vividly one of the answers Tristan told me was, well, because I couldn't find really the problem, with air quotes again. Tristan told me, well, we don't really have a problem right now, but we're on a rocket ship. We're on this hyper growth, meaning we're doubling basically everything every year. And I'm really worried of how this is going to stick and continue being this way along this journey. And he thought I could help with that. And so that became the puzzle I had to solve. Basically saying, hey, we have a working company right now, which is very agile. And that's true. I can explain that in a minute. But how is this going to scale in the future? How do we keep this while scaling? And so this became the puzzle I solved. Should I go into
scaling is actually one of the problems that we are talking a lot about here in the Agile community globally, right? So it's an interesting story. So how did that start? So you got hired, you went in. How did the first steps go?
So the state I was in was a small company, still 70-ish people. We're 190 now, 18 months later. So it's really growing a lot. We had a couple of feature teams. So basically 2-3 teams pulling from one backlog, from one big backlog, pulling what they want, basically, and just getting things done. This team was really, really good at getting things done. They were releasing frequently. They were just pulling whatever they want. The backlog was pretty much prioritized. So whatever they were pulling had made sense. They were kind of measuring what they did. So they were doing good. They had almost 6 different products out at the same time. A few of those are internal products for our troops. I won't go into details about what is what. It would take too much time. But basically, they were pretty agile in this way. And what we wanted to do was to go to basically double the amount of engineers. So it's about 20. We wanted to go to about 40-ish, and then get ready for one more doubling later on. So we're in the process of doing this. What I personally, so when I approached this, what I personally didn't want to go to do is scale in terms of agile, scaled agile. Not safe, but scaling agile.
So tell me a little bit what you mean by that, because if I look at what you just described, we were 20, then we grew to 40, and now we're getting ready to go to 80. Like that sounds like a scaling problem. So what do you mean by I didn't want to scale?
Good question. What I often hear combined with the idea of scaling is basically having more teams work on the same thing, having some kind of joint effort in creating a product, and basically adding more teams to the same problem. And this leads to many problems in terms of communication. So you don't have one team working on one problem anymore. You have 2 teams, 3 teams, 4 teams, 20 teams working on the same problem, with the exponential number of communication pathways that happens between those teams. And this becomes a nightmare. And so what I wanted to try and reach is a state where you have compartmentalized work with very deep and profound ownership from one team to some kind of business context, and scale this way. So basically creating business silos. I know silos is not a good word in the agile world, but I assure you it is. Create business silos where the teams can be completely owner and do whatever they want, like a mini company. And not have to scale their effort in terms of having 2, 3, 4 teams working on the same thing.
So you were, if I understand correctly, you looked at the scaling problem, which in the end it was or is still. And the way that at the company now we maintain, the way you decided to tackle that problem was to, instead of growing the number of teams working on the same code base or same products, you decided to separate the teams by type of products, let's say, whatever that might be, business vertical, whatever that might be, and give them ownership, but having less teams work together. So kind of you were trying to augment the ability to deliver products that had business impact, but at the same time decrease the communication overhead within the teams that worked on the same topics. Is that a fair depiction?
It's quite right. I think I need to take an example to highlight what I mean. We basically based our reasoning on the book Team Topologies and created so-called stream-aligned teams. So basically, we tried to identify streams, which are business streams, which are really part of the business that makes sense in and out of themselves. We have, for example, two streams. One is centered on the engineers. The company is called We Maintain because we maintain equipment, so technical equipment in buildings, so lifts, escalators, doors, etc. And so one stream is responsible for the quality of life of our engineers who are on the ground doing the maintenance. And we decided, okay, this makes sense. Those are some of our key users, and we want them to have a good, productive life. We want them to spend their times doing the right thing. And so we're going to define a few business metrics, for instance, NPS score of the engineers themselves, the time it takes for them to do their work, how efficient it is, the completion of their work, etc. And those are going to be the success metrics of this team. And basically now the team can do whatever they want with our products across all the products if they need to fulfill this.
But wait, but that also means, if I understand correctly, that this when you use the word team, you're not really only talking about software team, right?
It's a product team.
Yeah, so you're including more than software engineers and testers, right? So walk us through what the team is then at We Maintain.
Each team has a product manager and UI UX designer, we call them product designer. So somebody who is very well versed from the tingling out the problem from the customers or the users, all the way to how do we translate this into a first of all, working design that works well in terms of UX, but also UI, something that is appealing, that will help us go forward. Then we have all the required technical skills, and I formulated this way explicitly, the required technical skills in each team to be able to deliver the work. And if that changes, then the team or the squad is responsible for getting those skills, either by acquiring them through training, or going to another team and say, hey, we need more mobile experience for the time being. Can you help us with that? Or hiring. So starting a hiring discussion with us and saying, hey, we're going to need mobile development long time, we should hire. So they're responsible for finding the right skills. It can be backend, front end, it can be mobile, Salesforce, IoT, etc. Everything is game. And they also have the skills for quality operations, coaching. They're doing themselves as well with some help. So basically, all the skills they need to be able to deliver in an autonomous way is what they have.
And you said skills, but you didn't only mean engineering skills, which you did mention explicitly. You also mentioned product manager and UI UX designer already before. And what I hear you say, and I want to double check that's the right understanding, what I hear you say is that you're looking at the concept of a team as kind of a unit of productivity, right? A team can produce something of value, whatever that might be, whether it's a feature or maybe a documentation or a training video or whatever that might be. I don't know. I have no idea, but I can imagine that that's what's going on. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, they do their own support. They do their own documentation. If they wanted to do video trainings, they would need to have the skills for that. And nobody else is responsible for this than the team as a unit. And this is what's so crucial in this approach is the team is responsible. The team is accountable. The team is going to do the work. The team is the team. And there's no discussion of it's not us, it's somebody else. No, it's the team. And if you don't have the required skills, means, if there's some roadblocks, etc., then it's my role then to help you remove this. Then that's
Okay,
the
so
role of
that
leadership.
now we get to that point because I wanted to
Mhm.
get there as well. So obviously you were, before you told the story of We Maintain, you talked about how frustrated you were as a consultant, and obviously now we need to talk about the contrast. So what
Yes.
is different from those companies you wanted to help but felt like you were just pulling or pushing a rock uphill, or as we usually also say, pushing a rope? So
Mhm.
how do you, how do you make sense of what is happening now versus what you saw before? What are the key differences?
Um, Obviously, it's going to be prejudicial to talk about those former clients the way I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Basically, how I approach this problem is I am the problem. Um, if vision is not clear, if the alignment is not clear, if the strategy is not clear, things cannot go well with air quotes under me in the teams. So this is where it starts. And when you see problems going on below, then the first thing is you go back to first principle. Where could that come from? The most likely is above. And so you start looking, is our communication clear? Is our vision clear? Is our mission clear? Are we communicating the right thing? Are we beating the drum in the right direction? We're using OKRs, our OKRs working the way they should be. And if all this is not clear, then you don't need to search further. You start there. And so it's been 18 months of constantly questioning, are we doing the right thing? Are we iterating the right way at strategic level? And this is something I haven't seen before with my clients. They were basically assuming, and this is where the prejudice comes in, they were right. And their budgets were right. And the way they did the whole governance thing was right. And we just had to change the way the teams work. And it just doesn't work this way. We decided from leadership perspective that team ownership is paramount, that people need to be able to take decisions without asking us. And if they're not taking the right decision, in air quotes, it's like David Marquette wrote in Turn the Ship Around, then it's not a problem of the people. It's a problem of the information they had and when they took that decision. So basically, it's our problem again. And this is very much empowering for me as a leader to always think I'm the problem and not the others. And so we're fixing this the whole time. We're changing this the whole time. We're focusing things the whole time. We're rehashing. This is the direction we want to go. And only when we're sure this is not the problem can we start working with the teams and see what could be the problem afterwards. But this is unlocking so much potential already.
So we're going to go there to the unlocking part in a
Sure.
second. David Marquette has also been a guest on the podcast. I'll put the link to the episode on the show notes,
Cool.
as well as to the book Turn the Ship Around. So let's look at that unlocking. So you started by saying, well, the difference is that when I see a problem, I assume I'm the problem and I need to figure out, what's missing in my communication, interaction, whatever. And, if that's not the case, then we'll figure it out. But I start there, right? That's what I heard.
Yep.
And I also heard you say that very often in organizations, the leaders who bring coaches and Scrum Masters in assume that the problem is the teams, not themselves, obviously, so they have no reason to change. So I'm a Scrum Master and an Agile coach, and I go to organizations that are probably at the same state as your previous clients were. So what do I do, right? We can't all be engineering leaders that We Maintain. That job is taken, right? So what tips do you have for us in dealing with that struggle?
The unfortunate answer is I don't have a good recipe, but I think we have to start with leadership again. We have to start with a vision. We have to start by highlighting what the effects of not having a clear vision, of not having passionate people does on the organization. I recently explained things by using the Agile Manifesto. but not using the 4 sentences of the Agile Manifesto, which are basically wishy-washy that anybody can succeed, and say, well, obviously we're more people and interactions over processes and tools. Obviously, we're a giant German company doing engineering, and we're obviously doing Agile. Now you go to the principles page where the 12 principles are listed, and it's way harder to wiggle yourself in this and to explain that you are Agile if you're not really living agility. If your development teams are not able, because of your structures, to talk to the customers, you have to stop there. Again, big German company, I had 5 hoops between the development teams and the customers. 5 different persons transforming the message between the customers and the development teams. You don't have to search anywhere else. You cannot be Agile. You cannot start thinking in agility if your developers are not in contact with the people using the software, period. And this was clearly written in the manifesto and in the principles. And somehow we said, well, that's maybe okay. Like it's giant structures, so we need this added complexity in the middle. As soon as you start saying this, you're losing the battle against agility. So you have to start going back to this, taking the principles one after the other and saying, in all honesty, are we there? And if not, what can we change? And I'm pretty convinced that once you have managed to honestly answer to all those 12 principles and say, yes, we're doing this, then you will be agile. But as long as you're fooling yourself and not saying yes, you won't be there.
And I think I see extreme programming explained in the background there. And
yes.
When we go back to the origins of Agile, we have to remember that the Agile Manifesto is a collection of ideas and experiences from people who had successfully delivered software, which were not that many at the time. And it starts with the idea that we have discovered and continue to discover new ways of working that help us deliver high value to our customers. And I think it's one of the ethos we need to bring in as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches to the teams that we work with, right? It's like, okay, guys, how do we measure success? Not for us as a team, but for us as a business. How do we measure success? Because if we don't know that, we can't organize ourselves around that definition of success, which brings me to the question that ChatGPT asked me to ask you.
How do you do it?
How do you measure? This one was exactly from ChatGPT. I asked, so ChatGPT, what question should I ask Tim? And he said, how about asking him, how do you measure the success of your Agile software development projects and teams, or deliveries if you don't call them projects? What metrics do you typically track together with the teams? You don't push them onto the teams, as I understood, but you track them together. So what are those metrics?
You should have given me a heads up. I would have asked ChatGPT what the answer is.
You can still do it quickly.
Yeah. There's going to be 2 answers. So the first one is going to be the answer I already gave about the stream-aligned team-centric metrics. So basically, we didn't enforce or push metrics on the teams, but we asked them to create some kind of portfolio of metrics that in their opinion makes sense and that will show that they're creating the right thing. And so I don't claim to be smarter than them and to know what is right, but if they give me an answer that clearly is wrong, we're going to have a discussion, which hasn't happened. They found very interesting metrics to follow, and they're following them, and that's the best I can ask for. As long as there's some kind of PDCA cycle, so plan, do, check, act cycle, feedback loop on this, and they realized after the fact, okay, this metric was maybe not the right one, and iterate on that, I'm fine. I'm all good. That's the empowerment I want to give them. That's really, I will act as some kind of servant leader, host leader, coach in the background and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But that's it. That's their game. That's the first part of the story. The metrics I personally look at are the DORA metrics, or the DevOps metrics. We have something like a 1.5 deployment rate per day over the whole product engineering group, which is, I said, something like six products. So that means one development per product per week minimum. And this is a measure I really follow, because this is very important for me. It is a sign that the organization is still healthy, that we're producing software regularly, very fast or very quickly, that stuff are getting out the door and in front of customers or in front of our users. And this is a very first metric. The DevOps metrics, or the DORA metrics, the Accelerate metrics, I'm not sure what the term is right now, also speak about incidence rate and recovery rate. I follow those as well. So really saying, okay, we shouldn't have too much incidents, but having no incidents would be a sign of something going already as well. So we want to have some incidents because we want
at least it shows the software is being used, right?
Yeah, it's being used, and we're not polishing things too hard before releasing them. We're going a little bit of risk there, here or there, and that's okay, as long as, third metric, recovery rate is very fast. When we recover, it takes 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, and that's it. And so we can go into some risk. We can experiment live in production for some things, not for everything, because we know we can fix this very fast afterward. And so basically, those DORA metrics really help me to see, is the engineering organization on a rhythm? Are they producing things that is going all the way to production? And is this going fast with a healthy dose of risk and a healthy dose of safekeeping? And those are the metrics I cherish. After that, I don't follow much. I trust my teams to do the right thing. They will follow up with their customers, with their users. They're producing things. So if it goes the wrong direction, their metrics will show it. If they stop producing things, my metrics will show it. And we're going to have discussion every week, because I have a very heavy dose of one-on-one with the organization. Very quick but frequent discussions with them. So it's something between 15 and 20 minutes every week with at least 15 people. And that's enough. I don't need more information than that. And then we have some I mean, not the right way to put it. Then there's a party feeling. Every Monday morning, we have a weekly tech meeting with all the tech group, so 40 people, where they just party. They show us what they did last week. We see what went to production. We see the changes. We use Google Meet, and you can add emojis directly on the screen, and they pop up on the screen. And so quite often you see hands clapping on the screen and people cheering in the chat. And that's enough for me to say, hey, this organization is actually pretty agile. Same goes for Slack. We're using Slack and posting release messages every so often, highlighting what was the pain point, what is the solution, how does it look like, how some kind of very early documentations for the stakeholders. And you see screenshots before, after, some arrows and stuff. And we use the emojis as well to answer to the messages. And quite often you see a whole bar of emojis with some hands clapping, strong arms, starry eyes, mind blown, etc. and you have 20 or 30 of those. And this is, to me, a sign of a healthy organization. Something is going on. Something is going out the door.
And even if that would not be the sign, then you have the metrics you just discussed that help you see that it's still working as we expect it to work. Okay, so we're getting deep into this conversation, and I'm sure this could go for a long time, but we do need to stop, Tim. So before we go, what are some of the concepts and ideas that you'd like our listeners to kind of tag into their mind, understand deeper, and what are some of resources that we could go into and learn more about those concepts and ideas?
I would say the first thing is really, what does it mean for a team to be autonomous? And And the answer that will come to your mind is probably not the answer that will come to your mind if you think about it for half an hour. And that will be different from the answer you will give after you read a couple books. And so it's really a recurrent or an iterative process to think about this and go even deeper and deeper and deeper. We, as I said, we use team topologies to trigger this discussion in the company. I very frequently reference David Marquette's Turn the Ship Around, also as an example of what it means to really think in autonomy. And for me, it's really the ANO, and where you should start is really questioning what is autonomy for us right now? How can we go one step further? And then do this thought experiment of going one step further, and even one step further, and even one step further, and say, where is it going to break? Why is my gut feeling telling me, oh, never, ever? And then surmounting this gut feeling and go even one step further still. You mentioned XP, trying thought experiments with XP. We can go into mob programming and say, why couldn't I put the whole team in front of a computer and say, do your magic? And trusting that they're empowered, they're going to do it, and see what happens. So really thinking deep about empowerment. And I assure you, you're going to realize a lot of roadblocks that are actually in your power to change if you're in a leadership position, and that you should consider changing.
Absolutely. And of course, we can, as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, also influence leadership and should not forget that we have a role to play there as well. Tim, it's been a pleasure. Where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So on my homepage, timbourguignon.fr, because I'm French, and that will be the route for everything. You'll see where I'm on the social medias from there, and also the podcast I publish every week since 2016. So 250 episodes already. Software developer's journey.
Absolutely, we'll put the link to the podcast also on the show notes. Tim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
It's been a blast.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.